Welcome to the second part in what I expect to be a three-part series around the Supernote Manta. This is the new note-taking device from Supernote, which has just been released here at the end of 2024. In this particular video, I'm going to go over the results of the battery tests. I'm going to put that into a little bit of context. And then say what I think about the results. And then we're going to go over a number of things I think are of interest about the device. So we're just going to kind of do some general observations and points of interest in this video, all in the service of eventually setting the stage for the final review, which will take place in the third video. Now, normally my video series have 4 parts, and the part that's missing is a visual tour, which is a very detailed tour of what the device can do. I'm not doing it for this particular series because I did that a year ago with the release of the Supernote Manta, and there have been some minor changes to the software since then, but not significant enough that I think it's needed. If you go back to the visual tour I did for the Nomad, a vast majority of that is relevant to the Manta, and so there's no sense in doing that again. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video if you want to go through and just get a sense of all the things the device can do. That video is still good, relevant to the Manta. But in this video, we're just going to cover those battery test results and other things. So let's go ahead and get on in and start talking about the battery. Okay, the battery results for the Manta were interesting. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do a quick demonstration of the different power saving features on this device. And the reason I'm going to do that is because normally my process is I do the battery test with all these features off. And in fact, that is what I've done with the Manta. But as you'll see as we go through the results, I did some of them again with one of the power settings on, the no load setting. So let me establish that first. We'll go through the results, and then I'm going to give you my overall thinking and kind of bringing that together. The device has 3 predominant modes that you can either toggle on or off to save power on this device. So let's take a look at those. I'm going to swipe down, go into settings, and then I'm just going to go over here to battery. And you can see those 3 items here. So the first one is called no load shutdown. And this is basically, the way it reads is it says that for 20 seconds goes by, the device goes into this mode, and the impact of that is that when you start writing with the stylus, you'll notice a slight lag. I have to say that in my own personal experience, I notice very little lag. On occasion, I'll notice it, but for the most part, I don't notice it at all. So this actually isn't much of a downside. However, I have noticed in addition to that, that there is this downside of sometimes, touch swipes aren't as responsive when you're in this mode. So for example, when I'm bringing down the drop-down bar, I'll find that I have to do it twice because it's in this mode. Or some of the icons, say in the note-taking app, I'll tap on it and I'll have to tap on it again to come out of this mode. So that is the trade-off that I can see of using this. However, the battery savings is really extraordinary. And in my opinion, it's worth keeping this on and dealing with that very minor hassle of potentially having to swipe or tap twice. Another power setting is auto sleep. Auto sleep is when the device is in kind of a readiness state, but the screen is off. And coming out of that then takes about 1 to 2 seconds, which is very quick, and then you can just start using the device as normal. You can go into auto sleep either by pressing the power button or closing the cover. So having this off doesn't mean that power sleep won't take place. This is just a way of setting it on a timer. So if you leave your device, it'll go into sleep mode, and you can see those options there. Finally, you have auto power off, and this is where the device completely shuts down. The positive of that is it totally preserves the battery life. I mean, it might drain a little bit over very long periods of time, but for the most part, the battery is preserved. However, the downside of that is it does take quite a bit of time to reboot, and I've measured this device at 35 seconds. So that's something to be aware of. So it saves battery, but it comes at this cost of rebooting. And there is the options that are available there. So here are the results of the battery tests, and this grid represents all the 10-inch or larger devices where I've done the exact same kind of tests. And you can see that's in alphabetical order. You see devices from Amazon, from Books, and Remarkable, and of course you have the Supernote A5X near the bottom of the screen. The first thing we're going to measure is standby with the screen off, and this is the same basic battery drain as you have in sleep mode. And so basically consider the device in a readiness state, but the screen itself is off. In the Supernote's case, if you click on the power button or you open the cover to get out of this state, then it takes about 1 to 2 seconds, closer to 1 actually, for it to be ready to go. So it is very much ready in a very quick period of time. And the battery drain in that particular state is at 0.06%. And that's not a record on this table, but it does put this device well into the upper half of the devices that are represented here. The next category we're going to come up on is standby with the screen on. And the critical thing to emphasize here is that all power settings have been turned off, as is the usual custom when I do these battery tests. So the no load in particular is also not set for this particular test. Now this is when the device has the screen on. You can interact with it at any time, either by touching the screen or drawing on it. And what's the battery drain associated with that? And with the Manta, it's 1.7%, which does put that on one of the higher devices on the list. Not the highest by a large margin, which is the Pocketbook InkPad X Pro, but it is still well among the highest represented here. In a similar fashion, having Wi-Fi on, so that's the screen on and Wi-Fi's on, but Wi-Fi is not actively downloading in this state. It's just open, ready to go. That battery drain is 3.8%, which is also among the highest of devices on this table. But what if we were to select the no load power function? What would that impact be? And let's take a look at this table again. And we're going to revisit. The standby screen off does not change. That's still 0.06, a high mark on this table. But the standby screen on does change, and that becomes 0.1%. It actually goes from being one of the worst to the best on this table. That's how significant that power load savings is. In a similar fashion, Wi-Fi becomes 0.5, only a fraction worse than the Remarkable Paper Pro, which is the best device on the table. So there is a significant difference between having no power saving modes on and just having the one no load power savings on. It takes the Manta from being among the worst devices to pretty much the best on this table. So a pretty significant difference for that one power setting. Let's move on then to both reading and writing, the two most common functions that you can do on a device. The reading test is basically done either with the Kindle or Kobo. In this case, it's Kindle because that becomes native with the Supernote Manta. And in this particular test, the per hour battery drain was 3.6%, which is, again, does place the Supernote among the lower end of the table. Continuous note-taking, and this is basically a test where I go through and I write intensively for 10 minutes, and then I'm checking the battery rate every 30 seconds until it changes. So it's meant to be a very arduous, albeit short test to basically measure the impact of note-taking. The percentages themselves are a bit of a fiction. You don't expect, for example, the Kindle Scribe to burn 6% per hour unless you're vigorously taking notes for that entire hour. So in that sense, it's a little bit of an artificial measurement. But again, all devices are measured the same way, so it is a fair way of at least understanding relative to each other how well the battery handles under note-taking. And in this particular case with the Manta, the device comes in at 11.9%, which is not unusually high. It is on the lower end, but it's pretty close to the average as well. So the Manta does better in note-taking in terms of battery than it does around reading through the Kindle application. The main ramification of using the no-load power savings is swiping down from the top. You'll notice normally I swipe down once and it will show the menu bar, but here I'm going to have to do it 2 times. Notice now that I've done this, if I do it again, it happens on the first time. So that's an example of trade-off, basically, of using this mode versus not having no-load mode on. So if we just consider the Manta in terms of how it did on these battery tests, with none of the power saving modes turned on, which is true of all the other devices tested, it doesn't stack up very well. It has one of the worst battery drains. It's not the worst device out there, but it's definitely toward the lower end. So do I think then that the device has poor battery life as a result? And I would have said yes if it were not for this no-load feature. Now, one of the reasons why I turn off power saving mode is, first off, to have a level playing field between devices, but also because there are trade-offs in turning on those power saving features. In a lot of cases, it will make sense for the end user to use those, but I like to at least strip those away to have kind of a pure environment, if you will, to the extent that that's possible. And again, the Manta doesn't perform well under that criteria. But I think this is actually one of the areas where Supernote should get a lot of credit. That is specifically having this toggle for the no-load power savings, because clicking on that makes a dramatic difference on the device. And it takes a device that performs on the lower end and it makes it a device that is either average or even top of its class on various categories with minimal sacrifice. I mean, the worst case scenario is you might have to swipe or tap twice to get out of that, which I think is a pretty nominal compromise given all the battery savings that you get. Most of my time with the device has been with the no-load selected on, and the battery life has been incredible, and I've barely noticed the inconveniences. So despite the fact that with all power savings off, the Manta doesn't perform very well, I think in a more practical sense, almost everyone will want to pick that no-load power savings, and they'll just get used to working with the device when it switches into that mode, double tapping or what have you. So overall, I think actually the battery life of the device is good if you select that no-load option. Now, why might you want to turn off the no-load option? Well, I'm not a sketch artist, but I can imagine that if you were doing that and you were pausing and then you had to sketch and it didn't register the stroke, that might be pretty annoying. So there are certain situations I can imagine where you really need that super level of precision. But I think for the average user, certainly for note-taking, turn on the no-load and you'll get great battery life as a result. So let's do a quick example of what it's like to use a Bluetooth keyboard on this device. Now, how we got to this is I've got my trusty Bluetooth keyboard here, right here, which I've paired. And let me show you how that process works. So if I swipe it down, then you have the Bluetooth icon. You have to make sure that's on. And then you go into the settings button. And then you go into my device. And then there's Bluetooth. You click on that. And then your available devices are listed here. We're already paired, so nothing to worry about there. We do need, however, to go into a document. See that little W with a plus? We're going to start a Word document. Here we are, and we've got our cursor. So let's start typing. So I'm going to talk out loud as I type. This is typing on the keyboard. It is a bit choppy. Sorry for the mistakes, as I am just an okay typer. As you can tell, there is a lag in getting the letters out, but it is certainly functional. Okay, so that's what it's like to use a Bluetooth keyboard. It's an okay experience. Other devices can kind of handle the refreshing better, but this is something that Supernote could work on. They could improve on this in a future update. So I would say it's okay. It would be my overall assessment as it currently is. So I just wanted to say a couple of quick words regarding linking accounts. And if we swipe down and we go into settings, then of course you have your opportunity to log into your Supernote account. I've done that in a past Supernote device, but generally speaking, for my daily use, I don't use a Supernote account. Instead, if we go to this Drive icon, I use a Google Drive account, and you can see there's also options for Dropbox, OneDrive, and of course we have Supernote Cloud represented again. The one thing I do want to say about Google Drive was I was very impressed by how this device loaded my documents once I signed in. So the process I went through is I took my old A5X, I backed up all my files onto Google Drive, and then I logged into the account on this device, and then it automatically downloaded the whole file structure. Everything was perfect, literally in a very short period of time. And unfortunately, I didn't actually measure it. But of course, that's dependent on your internet speeds, etc. But I was really satisfied in the amount of time it took to basically take all my files and load them on this device. And I was basically up and running after a very short period of time. This is really impressive, and this is particularly notable. I don't know if this is how Google Drive worked when the Nomad came out, but I do know that for Supernote accounts, people had issues with loading files, which eventually did get resolved. But just to note that it was a really smooth experience on this device, at least using Google Drive. So kudos for that process. Okay, so I thought I would show off the different document types, at least the more popular ones that you can use on this device. And my particular area of focus is going to be on the user interface, particularly the menu that we have here. I've chosen to have my menu on top because I think it gives me the most screen real estate while having it kind of out of the way. But I could have had it down here or over on this side, or I could even have it as a floating bar. I just happen to have chosen this particular format, which I prefer. The one thing I'll comment about this is that all the functions that I generally use the most are here that are visible to me, and some of the more infrequent things I use are on the sub menu. So you've got your icon here, which is basically taking you to the file structure of the device. You've got your table of contents button here, your pen styles here, you've got your erasers here, your lasso tool, your layers and template here, undo and redo, and then gesture controls. And if we click on this ellipsis, then you have additional features like you can rename, you can set the cover of, in this case, of the notebook, your templates, your links, keywords. You've got your page options, adding, deleting, moving, etc. You've got the ability to export. You can create a quick link, which puts it on, if I swipe down, you'll see I have quick links, and it can be either the current page, a particular page of this document, or it can be just the document in general. In which case, if it's the general one, you can see I've already added it. It will just return to whatever the last page you were in the document. You've got your preferences, gestures, and again, talking about the toolbar, as we said just a few moments ago. So this is in a notes document. Let's go ahead. We'll do the drop-down bar here. There's an example of that quick access. So there is my note file here. But let's go ahead and take a look at a PDF file. So that is right here. So here we are inside of a PDF file, and you notice that a lot of the design language remains exactly the same. So you've got, again, your icon to go into your file structure, your table of contents icon, pens, erasers, lasso, undo, redo, gesture. So almost identical. And then if you click on this ellipsis, you do have some differences here that are specific to PDFs. For example, your search functionality, you can change contrasts, and etc. Bookmarks, that sort of thing. So things that are relevant to PDFs. Let's go ahead now and move then into EPUBs. And we'll go into our recent files. And there's an EPUB. This is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And again, you see the exact same design language here. We do have bookmarks here, in this case, on the main page, which makes sense because bookmarks are much more common for EPUBs. And then you can see the features very similar to PDFs that are available here on the EPUB. You do see a slight difference in the options available when you shift into a Word document or doc file. So we'll go ahead and do that. And this is what it looks like. So this is obviously the same. Here we have, you've got a couple different views of the document. This is you can go between the keyboard mode and handwriting mode, undo, redo, save, etc. So it's a little bit simpler here in the document format, but you still see a general continuation of the same UI design language throughout these different types of documents. And that's a really nice feature about Supernote that makes it easy to work with different document types without having to relearn the different interfaces because they are so similar. So of course it's possible to do annotations on documents, and I just want to show two examples of that. So we're going to go ahead and zip over to that EPUB file, and you'll notice here I do have an annotation. I can add to it, etc. As far as I can tell, though, these annotations cannot be exported from the device. However, if I do click on this item here, and we go over to annotations, they are listed. So as long as you're on the device, there is an indexing or referencing, if you will, of your annotations. In this case, I only have one, and that will send me there directly. Let's go ahead and do a second one, like so. And then you can see if we click on this icon, we're back in annotations, and now we have two. With a PDF, very similar functionality. We'll go ahead and go into a PDF file as an example. Okay, so here I have some annotations here in this PDF, and it's in black and white, obviously, because this is a black and white screen. I mean, you can do different levels of grayscale, but that's pretty much it. However, when you export the file, and you can export a PDF, in fact, let's go ahead and do that. You can export into different colors. So we're going to go ahead and go here to export. And then see, here's the option. You can either do the original blue or red. It then exports it as a document on this device, and then you can actually then transfer that device over through a few means. For example, if you have your Supernote account, you can do it from the Supernote cloud. You can connect to your a web browser on the same Wi-Fi network and move files that way. And the annotations will come over into that downloaded document. So that's a nice thing about that. Much like with EPUBs, you do have the ability to have the referencing of your annotations. In this case, there's just the one. But when you export it, you're not going to get any of this referencing. It's only on this device. So when you export it, you are left with thumbnails. And if you do export in color, however, and the document itself is mostly or entirely black and white, those will pop on the thumbnails. So it's not the same as having a table of contents reference like we have here on the device, but you do have that ability as well. So here's just a quick look of that PDF downloaded. That annotation was basically made on the Supernote device. I exported it with the annotation in the color blue, and then I moved the file onto my computer. Just like that. If I go ahead and go into the list of thumbnails, you can see the blue annotation there, which helps stick out from the black text. One of the things that's nice about the Supernote device is that you can go into landscape orientation. And this is important because a document such as a PDF is really designed for a bigger screen size than what we have here. So if you go to different pages, Some of this text is legible, but then you get to something like this, and the document is really small. So one easy way to kind of fix that on a screen of this size is to go landscape. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, which will allow me to rotate the screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and rotate it like so. So now all of a sudden, you're looking at the first half of the page, and if I swipe, it'll then go into the second half of the page. These little finger icons basically show you where that dividing line is. So this is the bottom of the previous page, as you can see down here. And then a lot of the text now is very much legible. So this is a really easy way to manipulate PDFs on a screen of this size to make them legible with very little effort. I just turned on the rotated the device itself to reorient the page, and now I'm off to the races. No other manipulation is required. So a very nice way of being able to go through a PDF document. Now there's no zooming available on this particular view, but if we go ahead and return back to this view, the standard view, then we do have the ability to pinch and zoom, which I'll do here. There we go. And you can see you get this icon over here, which helps you to navigate across the document. And of course, you can manually pinch and zoom as well. Let's go ahead and move that around. So this is an alternate way of navigating through a PDF file. It's not as elegant as just simply flipping it over, but this is certainly available to you. There are a few options on the device to share files, and if we just swipe down, if we make sure we're on Wi-Fi access, I'll just walk through a few of those, at least in terms of how they're activated. This one right here is your syncing function. So, for example, if you wanted to sync on the Supernote cloud, then you can just click that button that would initiate a sync. I have a connection to Google Drive, so if I click on this, it will back my files up onto Google Drive. So that's what that icon does, and Wi-Fi has to be on in order for that to be active. You then have this particular icon right here, which allows you to basically open up a web browser on another device as long as it's on the same Wi-Fi network. And that web browser will then give you an access to the file structure on this device. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But basically, it's a way that you could download individual files if you wanted to onto a device, or you could even import files that way as well. And then here you have screen sharing functionality, which again, if you're on the same Wi-Fi network, allows you to share your screen, whatever is showing on the device, with the addition of a pointer, which is pretty cool. And that's, as far as I know, unique among other devices. A lot of devices have screen sharing functionality of some kind or the other, but not with a pointer. And I think that's a pretty significant difference. So let's take a look at file sharing and at displaying the screen. So this is basically screen sharing in action. Again, I've activated on the Supernote. I went to the proper URL on the web browser, being on the same network. And now I can write on the device. In fact, let's do that now. And you can see it there. In addition to that, if I hover the stylus just above the screen, you'll notice I get that circle as a pointer. And this is really the thing that differentiates a Supernote from other devices that screen through a web browser, is this ability to have a pointer. So you could write all your notes, for example, and then use the pointer to focus on the things that you're talking about as you're having a discussion in a meeting or a lecture or what have you. The pointer is a really unique feature. As far as I know, Supernote is the only one to do it, and it definitely adds a lot of value. So here's just an example of what the desktop application looks like. This is basically something you install onto your computer, and then it connects to your devices through the cloud. So if you have to use the Supernote cloud services in order for this to work, but if you have access to this, you can download files, you can load files this way. And so it's just that they call it their partner app. And it is just kind of a nice addition, although not necessary because of the other file sharing features, but this is one option that's available to you. So this is an example of the feature where the Manta is basically sharing its file structure through a web browser. We're on the same Wi-Fi network. I switched the right buttons on the device, and now I can go through here. And again, I have the opportunity, just like in the desktop application, of importing files or exporting files from this interface. Now the Supernote can run apps, but there are some caveats to that. The way that you access apps is you slide down, and then down here is the menu of the apps that are available, and this is completely customizable. I've actually created this customization myself. Now if you go into Settings, then you can go into the Apps button, and then you go into the App Store, and you'll notice there's really only 2 options available there. So not a lot of options. However, you do have the ability to sideload apps. In order to do that, however, you do need to go to Security and Privacy and allow for sideloading. I haven't sideloaded apps myself, so I can't comment on that process. But if you're curious about that, check out the Supernote subreddits. They talk about that there. You can certainly ask questions. The last thing I'll say, if we go back to the apps thing and we go to Customize Sidebar, this is where you have that ability to decide what apps you want to add or choose and which ones you don't want to display when you swipe down on this bar. Supernote does have a formal to-do app in the device. And basically, it's fairly easy to go from notes to create a to-do and move those into that app. So basically here on this screen, I'm going to go ahead and circle this item here. I'm going to do my 2 fingers so I get my lasso tool, like so. It selected the whole thing. And then this calendar icon, I'm going to tap on this and then tap on the little checkbox icon. And it's going to send this to the to-do app. Actually, I can attach a date with it. You can see it's taken my cursive or script, if you will, and it's translated it perfectly, actually. I could also rename it, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with that, and I will add that in. So now, see, the to-do is now added. It returns me back to the note. Now, there is a connection between the to-do app and the note, but you can't see that here. In fact, not only is this created as a to-do, but this is a to-do as well, and you just can't tell. And I can delete these things, and it won't make any difference in the to-do app. So let's go ahead and go in there and select that. And you can see there are our 2 to-dos. It is linked in the sense that if I click on these icons, it will send me back to the notebook page. But if I do anything here, in fact, let's go ahead and delete this one as an example. Oh, I accidentally deleted that, but that's okay. Let's go down, go to to-do. See, it's unaffected here. So there's only linkage in the sense that this icon takes you to where the to-do was generated, but there is no connection. So the to-dos actually now live independently, if you will, within this application. One last thing to note is you can create multiple lists and you can organize the to-dos. Obviously, if I check a thing, it will list as completed and so on. So it's a nice little functionality. Just be aware that nothing that happens once it reaches this to-do thing has any impact on the notes where the to-do came from. I thought I would do a quick demonstration of responsiveness, and this is kind of a difficult thing actually to convey. But the basic idea is that the Supernote Manta is a pretty responsive device. I don't think it's necessarily the fastest device, but it's definitely up there, and I don't think that it yields a lot to its competitors, if it yields anything at all. And responsiveness can be something that kind of varies. That's the other difficulty of displaying it. But what I thought we would do first is compare the Manta, which is here on the left, versus the Viwood's AI paper here on the right. Now, an interesting comment before we get into that is both devices are using the Carta 1300 screen, and in addition, both have Mobius. So why is the Viwood's a little bit lighter, and why does the writing pop a little bit more, at least in my opinion? And it's hard to say, but it might be because of the Feel Right film on the Supernote device. Having said that, I don't think that there really is a functional difference between these two devices. You may have an aesthetic preference. I tend to prefer this one a little bit more, but I wouldn't read too much into this. This is a pretty minor difference in my opinion, as is the responsiveness. So how we're going to kind of test responsiveness is I'm going to go ahead and click on some of the presets up here, and we'll see how quickly it basically updates. So let's go ahead and click on that, and so on. And what you'll notice is it kind of varies between being incredibly responsive to just a slight beat off. And there's just a quite a slight delay that is sometimes there, but sometimes not. Like, that's pretty snappy. See a slight delay there. So nothing significant. But let's go ahead and come over here to the Viwoods and let's see what we've got here. So maybe just a hair of a delay. Well, again, it varies. Sometimes it's immediate, and sometimes there's just a slight jumping ahead. The Viwoods might be a hair, and I can't emphasize this enough, a hair more responsive, at least in this particular demonstration. But I think just in general, they seem pretty comparable to me. Let's take a look at another device that I think might be a little bit snappier than the Manta, and that is the Books Note Air 4C. So here we go with that device. And let's go ahead and take a look then at how responsive it is, again, using pen styles. One quick comment is I do have a little bit of front lighting on, which is necessary. If I didn't have that on, then, and we'll turn that off for a second, you can see how dark the screen is compared to the Manta. And that's because this has that Kaleido 3 screen on top, which creates that darkness. So you gotta combat that with some front lightings. We'll just put a little bit on there. But let's go ahead and click on the pen styles here and just move between them. You can see there's just no delay whatsoever in these different selections. So that's what I mean by the Books device being just a little bit snappier. Let's go back to the Supernote device. Well, now it's looking pretty snappy to me. I don't really see much. Okay, there's a little bit of a delay there. Yeah, you can see a bit of a delay. So sometimes just as snappy as the Books device, sometimes a little bit of a delay. Regardless, I don't see a material difference between these devices. I mean, using this device, you would just get accustomed to it. I don't think there's enough here that would be a detraction in using the Supernote. But you have to acknowledge that the Books device has no delay at all in selecting items, where the Supernote has just a slight delay, maybe a half beat on some of these pen selections. Pretty minor in my opinion, not particularly notable, but I thought I would share that information. It's pretty difficult to convey what the device sounds like, but I am going to do a couple scratch tests here. Hopefully that will help in some regard. I'm going to start with the Supernote Manta. I'm just going to put the device next to the microphone and just run the stylus over it, and it'll give you a sense of what that sounds like. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got it right under the mic, and here we go. Okay, so that's basically me just writing on the screen. It was a little softer when it was these thin strokes, and these longer strokes, that's when it got a little bit harsher. Let's go ahead and then compare that to the previous device, the A5X. Again, we're going to put this right up to the microphone. Okay, and again, we went with the softer and then with the harsher lines, and that's what that sounds like. So I think the Manta has a little more of a pronounced sound, a little scratchier. To me, it gives a little bit better feedback, but that is, of course, just a preference. Let's go ahead and compare that then to the Viwoods. Okay, there it is. And so it didn't sound quite as scratchy. It did have, I think, a nice sound, but I think I prefer the Manta so far. And let's do our final entrant, which is the Books Note Air 4C. Okay, that's what that looked like. A little scratchier for the Note Air 4C. I kind of like the sound of it, especially initially. Then when we did the longer strokes, I think the Manta sounded better, but it's all down to preference. Hopefully this at least gives a sense of what it sounds like, but definitely that sense of not writing on the screen is delivered via that audio input. And on the Manta, I think they did a pretty good job. In one of my videos, I was asked to comment on the back of the device and the fact that the folio doesn't cover it. And in particular, what are the chances that the back would get dirty or would get scratched? And I'll be honest with you, I'm really not sure what that's going to be over time. It's something I'll have a better answer for 6 months or 1 year down the road. My general thinking, though, is the back is kind of this hard, smooth plastic, which strikes me as probably being fairly easy to clean. Just a slightly wet cloth, no excess water after all. You're just a seam away from the battery, so you want to be super careful about that. But it seems like you could be able to wipe it pretty easily. That's my sense anyway. What I don't have any sense about is this going to get scuff marks, particularly as you're setting it on the table for the first time before folding over the cover. I just don't know, and we'll get a sense again of that over time, but I just have no sense of that for now. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you found these observations helpful in painting a picture of what it's like to use the Supernote Manta. Went over a lot of the unique features, and I think a lot of the strengths of the device. I think the stage is set for the final review. I still have a little bit of thinking to do to consolidate that, but it's definitely coming together, and I hope to have that out shortly, just in a few days after this video is released. Until then, I'll see you next time.